Hi, welcome to Book Talk. In this episode, we are talking about Looking for Alaska by John Green, who is more famously known as the author of The Fault in Our Stars. Looking for Alaska was his debut novel. The first half of this video will be spoiler free, and I will be talking about the writing style and the characters and their relationships with each other. And then I will give you a spoiler alert before I dive into the deep philosophical themes and the TV show by Hulu and then the ending. Subtitles are available in this video if you prefer to have them on while watching something. I think critical reading makes us better writers and better thinkers, and I hope that this discussion helps you understand the book at a deeper level. So let's start. So this book won the Prince Award in 2006, which is an award for literary excellence for young adult literature. Like I said, this was John Green's debut novel, and I think that authors' debut novels contain more of their essence than any of their other novels do. I think it's because when authors start to write, they have to draw inspiration from somewhere, and what better source of inspiration than their own lives? What better way to churn out authentic writing than by writing about what you know and have experienced? Or they might be attempting catharsis. There might be some internal issue that needs to be resolved, or something that makes them pick up a pen and start writing for the first time ever. And that's why debut novels, or some aspects of them at least, are so closely based on the author's life. To think of it, it doesn't just have to be their debut novel. I've always believed that authors leave pieces of themselves in their writing. So John Green went to Indian Springs School in Alabama, which he used as an inspiration for Culver Creek Boarding School in this book. In fact, he uploaded a video of his musings on his YouTube channel, and it's a beautiful video. I'm going to put a snippet of it here, and you can watch the rest of it on his channel. I will link it in the description box.
The truth is, I wrote the book because I wanted to go home, by which I mean the fall of 1993, smoking cigarettes under this bridge with people I loved who loved me. I'd never loved peers like that before, ferociously, without any self-consciousness or fear. That couldn't last, of course, and it didn't. As the graffitied Walt Whitman quote puts it so succinctly, "These are the days that must happen to you." And after, you can go back to the smoking hole and its beautiful graffiti, but you can't be home again. And so I wrote the book to attempt time travel. What if I could go into the past, imagine things differently, make different choices? Maybe through fiction, I would be allowed back into the home from which time and loss had expelled me.
This book felt a little short to me. I wish it had been longer. There are things that are only hinted at that maybe could have been explored more. But that is why I loved the show so much. There are 8 episodes of around 50 minutes each, and the show takes the time to explore a lot of things. The book is split into 2 parts, before and after. So it is split into 2 sections by the plot twist. The book starts kind of with a countdown. So there are chapters named 90 days before and 50 days before, all counting down to this big plot twist. And then similarly, we have 1 day after, 9 days after. In fact, something that I noticed is that this book starts 136 days before and ends at 136 days after. So this countdown kept me interested, and I wanted to know what this big thing was, even though initially I found the book quite slow and boring. The teens were hanging out, pulling pranks, smoking a lot, and doing other stuff, but I wasn't really into this book till the plot twist came. So far, I've read The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, and An Abundance of Catherines, and all of them have this very distinct John Green style. There is wit, humor, philosophy, complex characters, and then a twist. John Green is credited with bringing in a new era of contemporary realistic teen fiction. He was quite a popular author in my circle of friends back in 8th grade, and we all used to read his books together. If one person was reading something, everyone else wanted to borrow that book and read it, and sometimes there were waiting lists because so many people had asked for the book already. I've read plenty of reviews calling his writing pretentious, but I just don't agree with that. He's got extreme reviews on Goodreads. There are people who hate his books, there are people who love his books, And I think that if his style suits you, then that's good. Otherwise, you're going to find it really, really irritating. And that is the special thing about his books. They spark discussions, they are controversial, and that is probably one of the reasons behind his success. There is definitely something about his books which I find quite fresh and unique and relatable, and I think he has a very frank style of writing. Sometimes he starts using bullet points, sometimes he says almost as if the narrator is talking to you in a very informal manner. He makes you laugh and he makes you cry. And I, anyway, love reading books about people and their struggles and them experiencing new things and learning about life. Coming of age is one of my favorite genres, and there are random, interesting facts. There are smart kids and they say smart things, and that's because that's how John Green himself is. He and his brother Hank Green have two main YouTube channels: Vlog Brothers, which is about their own life, and then Crash Course, which aims to educate high school students. And Hank also runs the channel SciShow. These brothers are complete nerds, and I love it. And so, obviously, that is going to reflect in John Green's writing. I think this book was also taught as high school curriculum in the USA, but then it was banned in 2015. It was removed from school libraries because of its explicit content. And if you've read the book, you know what scene I'm talking about. It was the most challenged book of 2015, even more so than 50 Shades of Grey. Go figure. People say that John Green's characters are always unrealistic because teenagers don't talk like that. Well, firstly, this was a special school for smart kids, and secondly, trust me, such teenagers exist. The friends in my circle used to read a lot and used to quote poetry and used to discuss deep philosophical questions. If a person has read the works of heavy thinking authors and has wrestled with life's important questions, then they are going to talk like that. It's just an effect of reading. But despite how literary and intellectual these characters are, they still behave like teenagers. They think it's cool to drink and smoke, so they do that. They rebel against authority. They date, sometimes the wrong people. They are annoying, but they are also endearing. And they have their own teenagery problems, which they think are more important than anything else. They are struggling to find their identity. They are going through emotions and not really understanding them. They are having their firsts. They are dealing with loss, and they are coming to certain realizations about life and tragedy and all that. If you're wondering, what is Yamika talking about? The characters don't mature or develop, they are just plain and boring. Okay, yes, I did feel that the characters in the book were not very well sketched out, but in the show, they were developed properly, and whatever I said does apply to them. And in the show, we've got adult voices to balance out the teenagers, which is something that is missing in the book. Let's talk about Miles Halter. Miles is someone who loves people's last words, and I found that really fascinating. And I think that goes very well with the themes of death discussed in this book. It actually comes from John Green's own fascination with last words, and I found a video of him in which he shares the last words of 50 people in 4 minutes, and I'm going to link that video up here. Miles lives in Florida and he has no social life there. He wants something better, something that he knows is out there waiting to be found. And inspired by Francois Rabelais' last words, I go to seek a great perhaps, he goes to this boarding school in Alabama in search of a better life. I think this phrase means that he is chasing a grand maybe, a possibility, a perhaps, something that just might change his life. He's not sure if life for him is going to be better at the boarding school, but it's going to be different. There are going to be adventures. He's going to be on his own and he will be pushed to discover who he is instead of just plain existing. At Culver Creek, he befriends three terrible influences and he basically does everything they do because he wants their friendship. And these guys drink, smoke, break the rules, and prank people. They are a bunch of troublemakers, and Miles slowly becomes one of them, which kind of makes sense because this is what he was searching for. This is what his great perhaps was all about. He wanted to be a part of something, he wanted to belong. I also felt that the Miles in the book is quite plain and naive. He has no sense of individualism. He has no personality apart from his fascination with last words. He's passive and introverted, which makes sense because he did not have a lot of friends in his previous school. He is more of an observer and less of a participant. Initially, the story is more about what is going on around him and less about what he himself is doing. He also spends a lot of time being in his head because there is quite a lot of narration and contemplation in this book. He keeps trying to connect his experiences to some philosophy or theory, and he's always thinking about life or Alaska or about something that he has to do. I guess that's a good writing tip for us aspiring writers. If you want to sketch a character who is pensive and thoughtful, then put more of internal monologue and less of dialogue. And if you want to show that your character talks too much but thinks too little, then put more of dialogue and less of internal monologue. So in the after section, Miles has more of a personality. He makes more choices and he is more involved in the world. When he had a proper conversation with Alaska for the first time about her labyrinth, he found her smart, but he was also smitten by her looks and by how curvy she was and how hot she was, and he spent quite a lot of time objectifying her in his head. He became obsessed with her after just one conversation, and he was willing to do anything she said in the hope that she would pay him the slightest of attention, even though she was dating someone else. This was annoying but also kind of realistic because this book is from the perspective of a teenaged boy, and I've known plenty of teenaged boys who paid more attention to the bodies of women than on what they were saying. To be very honest, whatever he felt for Alaska did not sound like love to me. He barely even knew her, as he himself realized later in the book. It was more like he was infatuated with her and he loved the idea of her, the enigma of her, but not Alaska herself. He did not think about how much he cared about her. He fantasized more about sleeping with her. And it's normal for a teenager to confuse these feelings with love. Alaska was a mystery to him and one that he really wanted to solve. And I think this is where the title of the book comes from. Throughout the book, he is looking for Alaska in the sense that he is always trying to figure her out and to make sense of who she is because he is obsessed with her even after the plot twist happens. Now, Alaska Young. This character honestly confused me, annoyed me, and intrigued me, and I think that is exactly how John Green wanted us to feel about her. I always got the impression that this whole mystery, this whole enigma of Alaska was a carefully constructed facade. She was perceptive, she was aware of the way people saw her, and she enjoyed it. On page 69, she said to Miles, "You never get me, that is the whole point." Maybe she wanted to be a mystery because she did not want anyone to see how truly messed up she was. That scene at the barn when Alaska made up this game called Best Day, Worst Day, she came up with the idea of that and she knew what she was going to say. She said that the day she went to the zoo with her mom was her best day and she left it vague deliberately. And then she told them about her childhood tragedy, which is a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it. And then she sat and drank in her sadness, and it was deliberate. I am saying all of this because I went through an Alaska phase myself in my teenage years. There were times when I would say something smart or mysterious, or I would try to portray myself in a certain way to look cool, and I think that is why I connected with Alaska so much. When I first read this book at the age of 15 or 16, I really admired Alaska. The way Miles looked at her and the way the rest of the boys thought about her. Oh, she's Alaska, she's so different, who knows what she's gonna do. I thought of all of that as the biggest compliment. She managed to touch everyone's life in some way, and I thought that she was the greatest thing to be. Because the more elusive you are, the more you pull people in. I genuinely used to think that if you were very good looking, very talented, very this or that, then you could get away with anything. People would forgive you, would still want to be around you. I thought that being this person who left an impression on everyone else and being this great philosophical thinker who taught someone something about life, that was the ultimate thing. I thought it was cool to have pain suppressed and that it made you more mature and that it gave you a perspective of life and that it gave you more depth. It made you see the world in a way that others would never see and it made you special and that it made people want you. But now I know that it's actually quite unhealthy. I feel like teenagers romanticize pain and being broken and being a mystery. I know for a fact that everyone puts such characters on a pedestal because if you open Wattpad and you read a book written by a 15-year-old, then there is going to be one character in it like that. Someone who is brilliant and good looking and they have a lot of potential in life, but they are handicapped by their dark, mysterious past and they drown their grief in alcohol. And this person is usually the love interest, and everyone feels so much for them. Everyone admires their strength and respects them and forgives their shortcomings. I feel like Alaska perfectly fits into this description. She rebelled against authority, and that made me root for her because I used to believe that all adults were evil and genuinely did not understand us. And teenagers also think that they know everything, but they actually don't. This has been one of my biggest realizations. Maybe we should not always do things our way, and maybe we should respect adults for their years of knowledge and experience. When I reread the book a few days ago at the age of 20, I could see Alaska from an outside perspective, and I realized that older people can see through this stuff. But Miles can't, and he himself is a teenager, so he doesn't know any better, and he is totally into it. He is romanticizing her and he wants to solve the mystery that is Alaska. Alaska is also a feminist and she regularly calls people out for objectifying girls. But when the colonel introduced her to Miles, she gleefully recounted the story of how she got groped over the summer. And no matter how I've tried to look at it, I just don't understand why she was so happy about it. And she did not even know Miles at that time. I don't know what this scene is supposed to accomplish. And she also pulled down Miles's shorts in that scene. And I just don't see how a character can go from this to musing over the labyrinth. Now let's talk about the manic pixie dream girl, which is a pop culture cliche. It's a fantasy girl who is quirky, whimsical, and eccentric. She knows the male protagonist better than himself and he falls for her. She saves him from himself. She helps in the transformation of this man without any real involvement of her own. The man who was previously boring meets this girl who is full of life, falls in love, and learns from her to embrace life and its infinite mysteries. And that is her only role in this story. She does not have her independent goals. And this is important because not every quirky female character comes in this category. John Green wanted to deconstruct this trope, which means examining a trope to show how it would play out if real life consequences were applied to it. In doing so, the flaws are revealed. So it's kind of like saying, be careful. This is what happens when you have this trope. And I cannot dodge the spoilers any longer. So if you haven't read the book and don't want to be spoiled, then thank you so much for watching and please subscribe before you go. So yes, Alaska is a deconstruction of Manic Pixie Dream Girl. In Miles's eyes, Alaska is a goddess, but she repeatedly shows signs of emotional instability. He ignores that because it doesn't fit into his idealized image of her, and she calls him out on this. She points out that he likes the sexy, hard-drinking, party girl side of her and not the crazy, sullen bitch she sees herself as. The point is only driven further by the fact that the self-destructive behaviors that Miles and others encouraged are what led to her death. They did not stop her because she's Alaska and she's unpredictable and she's like that. A principal point of this novel is that this trope is an unhealthy and an unsustainable view of someone because it does not allow them to be a real person. And John Green partly wrote Paper Towns to deconstruct this trope further because he felt that he did not do a good enough job with this book. Now coming back to Alaska and her emotional instability, she knew how Miles felt about her and she led him on. She enjoyed the attention, she enjoyed feeling desired, and she flirted with him. She said that she's not flirting, but she put her head in his lap and she went to sleep. During the Thanksgiving break, when they were lying in the soccer field and drinking wine, she put her hand on his thigh. And when he tried to kiss her, she said, "Don't ruin it." What is that even supposed to mean? She kept giving him mixed signals, making him feel as if he had a chance, and he kept trying to decode her, and he kept pining after her, and he kept hurting, and all of it is just really sad. And towards the end, she asked him to kiss her, and she said to be continued, even though she was with Jake this whole time. And when we were introduced to her, we were also told that Jake was the only guy she had not cheated on yet. And I find that really disturbing. Alaska could be kind and friendly and caring, but she was also impulsive, reckless. She drank too much, smoked too much, rebelled against authority, and she was moody. What Alaska had gone through was terrible and valid, but the way she treated others, almost using them whenever it was convenient to her, and then taking out her frustration on them and then disregarding their feelings, it was not justifiable. She set up Miles and Lara was her friend. And then she made out with Miles, cheating on both Lara and Jake. And she only cared about herself, and she thought that her reading and her intellect and her good looks put her above other people. Alaska acted like that because she knew she could and that she would get away with it. Definitely not a person to idealize. If someone is treating you wrong, call them on it. Don't look into their past and try to explain away their behavior. It's not quirkiness, it's not moodiness, it is abuse. Miles failed to recognize her destructive behavior and to get away from it. Also, this might be a minor thing, but on page 103, when Miles and Alaska break into all of the rooms during the Thanksgiving break and they're trying to plan their pranks, and Alaska tells Miles to kind of go around and read the person through the room, that was kind of an aha moment for me. I had never thought of that before, and this is what made me want to decorate my room so much and to express myself through it. Coming to the Colonel, Miles could have drowned in the lake, but the Colonel did not want to be a rat and he felt that there were better ways to deal with it. Teenagers and their honor codes. I don't have much to say about this character except for the fact that he was the best character in the show. And random interesting fact about me, I was also one of those kids who memorized the capitals of all the countries in the world. Takumi was the rapper and the information provider of the group. Also, the letter that he gave to Miles at the end, confessing that he saw Alaska that night and she was looking for white flowers because she always put flowers on her mother's grave on her death anniversary. And Takumi did not tell this to Miles or the Colonel because he was mad at them. This made no sense to me. This was such an unnecessary thing. It made the whole investigation redundant because the answer was right there all along. And then Lara, I don't understand why she was even there. Why was Miles dating her? It was so uncomfortable to read about him getting intimate with her when he actually had Alaska on his mind. And Lara was so bland that she was given a Russian accent to give her a special trait and to keep her from evaporating into thin air. So there are lots of themes in this book. Firstly, we have the great perhaps, the search for something great which might or might not exist. Maybe Alaska was his great perhaps, because when she dies, after she dies, there's a part where he says that he was now perhaps less because he lost a great thing and he doesn't know if there is anything good left in the world anymore, which is something you feel when a loved one dies. Or maybe this great perhaps wasn't Alaska herself, but the feeling of being in love. Because before that, in his old school, he had never even been on dates. He had not felt this before. So, this infatuation was the first time he had this feeling, and that is probably why he called it love. Which brings me to the question, what did Miles and Alaska feel for each other? Alaska's flirting and asking him to kiss her, Did that mean anything, or was it just a fun kind of a thing for her? Why did she say to be continued? And would they have had a proper love story if she hadn't died that night? So many questions. Another theme that runs in this book is Alaska's labyrinth, inspired by General Bolivar's last words, "How will I ever get out of this labyrinth?" So, what is this labyrinth? Is it life? Is it death? I thought it was the cycle of life and death. You know, like how you are born and then you die, and then your soul reincarnates and you are born again and then you die again, and this keeps going on. I thought this was the labyrinth that he wanted to get out of. But for Alaska, the labyrinth was suffering. And it probably came from the fact that she was unhappy a lot of the time and she was carrying a lot of guilt because of the things that she had done. She was caught in a maze inside her mind, and this is what she wanted to escape. But I can't say why she wrote straight and fast in her book and what she thought the way out of the labyrinth was. I liked Miles's explanation though. He said that if suffering was the labyrinth, then forgiveness was the way out of it. Because when you forgive yourself and others, that is when you can move on from the thoughts tormenting you. Another heavy theme in this book is death. Everything connects to it somehow. Miles wonders about people's last words, and he wonders what happens after people die. Alaska thinks about the labyrinth and of escaping it. Dr. Hyde, one of my favorite characters, he also talks about death and what other religions think of it. And then Alaska actually dies, and we get to see how death impacts people. Losing a friend in teenage can be such a hard experience because that person is so young and their death is so unexpected. And then you realize that you now have to move forward and continue living without this person, and that you will get older but this person will forever be the same age in your mind, and then you think that they were the only person that mattered and that you won't ever find anyone like that again, and you begin to forget who you were with them. And I think that is what people mean when they say that a part of you dies with them. There is something that their presence used to bring out of you, and you will never experience that again. You wonder how long their impact on you will last, how long before you forget their faces, how long before every little thing stops reminding you of them. And then you worry that you will forget them, and then you want to preserve them. And all of these emotions have been very well captured in this book. This is what leads them to have the memorial prank for Alaska. Now, coming to Alaska's death, was it a suicide or was it an accident? John Green himself doesn't know, and he says that there is no way to know. She is the only one who knew her last thoughts, and nobody else was there in the car with her. When I first read this book, this annoyed me and confused me. Why have this whole investigation if you don't have to come to a conclusion and you only have to leave it hanging? And I told this to my best friend Mehek, and she said, that is the whole point. Sometimes you never get to know these things. Sometimes you just don't get closure and you have to continue living with that. And John said in an interview that he knew the ending right from the start. There were many things that changed, but this was one thing that he knew for sure, that this was how it was going to end. But if I had to think about it, if I had to get inside her head, and from whatever I have analyzed about her personality so far, I would say that it was an impulsive suicide. I think that her death was intentional and self inflicted, but that she really did not want to die. It was not a planned thing. She did not show any signs of suicide and she did not give her belongings away. She enjoyed life, she had friends, she had a great boyfriend, she had good looks, she could do what she wanted, when she wanted, and she did have a future planned, and she did say to be continued to Miles. If she had talked to one of her friends that night, and if she had shared her frustration instead of just jumping into the car, then it could have been prevented. They would have convinced her to go the next day, but that wasn't her. She never shared her problems and she thought that she could do it all alone. Most of the time she was normal, but she had periods of intense unhappiness when she got overwhelmed by a lot of things, and that led her to feel shitty about herself. And that night, she was in one of those phases. Everything was coming back to her. She let her mother die. Then she forgot her death anniversary and forgot to put flowers on her grave. Then she cheated on Jake and she ratted out Paul and Maria. She was overcome with regret and with guilt over how she always messes everything up. And maybe she felt happy with Miles, and maybe that multiplied her guilt because she did not feel that she deserved any happiness after letting down everyone. And this guilt, this persistent guilt over every stupid thing that she had ever done, was what formed her labyrinth of suffering. You can picture her in her blue citrus in the dark, lights creating the shadows over the road, tears blurring her vision. You can see her thinking, shit, 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 I fucked up again. I failed her again. I failed them again. I failed myself again. She can hear the siren of the police car, and maybe she starts to slow down, and maybe she knows that she can swerve and avoid the car. She's in a horrible place and she has the thought of ending it and of escaping her guilt and just taking the easy way out. And she's crazy drunk, so she's not very logical right now. She's had such breakdowns before too, but what is different this time is that right now, at this exact moment, she has the power to do it, and she lets that take over her. She thinks about the goddamn labyrinth and all her suffering, and she remembers the words in her book straight and fast. And before she can talk herself out of it, before she can even make sense of this decision, she presses her foot down on the accelerator and she hears the engine roaring and the sirens blaring and the blinding lights and the blinding pain, and there is chaos. And now it is too late to change her mind, and then poof, she's gone. Also, I felt that Alaska romanticized death, dying young specifically. She said things like, I might die young, but at least I'll die smart. And she says that you all smoke to enjoy it, but I smoke to die. There is a line on page 260. She collapsed into the enigma of herself. Was she so busy weaving this mystery that she became a victim of it? Did she want to be romanticized after her death? And did she want others to try to solve this mystery? And if she hadn't thought this way, would she not have killed herself in this manner? So let's finally come to the show. Ever since the book came out, there were talks about a movie being made, but then stuff kept happening and the idea was dropped. And then The Fault in Our Stars came out and it was a big hit. And then people started wondering, has this guy written any other books? The book came out in 2005 and the show premiered in 2019. So I think that John had a lot of time to look at all of the feedback that his book received and to figure out what all had to change. You know, you might finish writing a story, but you never quite stop thinking about it, and it keeps brewing and maturing in your mind, and you always kind of wish that you could change something and that you could do something about all of these afterthoughts. And I feel like John Green got the opportunity to do that with the show. He was one of the executive producers, and I think that this show takes care of all the shortcomings of the book, and that is why the show is better than the book. There, I said it. I said something that no bookworm is ever supposed to say, but the show is really good. You should watch it. The casting is perfect. There is great chemistry between the actors, and it honors the book very well. I think it perfectly captures the essence of this book. The humor has been kept intact. The best dialogues have been kept, and there were some jokes in the narration which have been changed into dialogue so that they could still be a part of the show. They shot the show where John Green actually went to high school, the place that was actually the inspiration for Culver Creek, and it's a whole vibe. The imagery in the book wasn't sufficient for me, but the show took care of that. And I love how, even though the show came out in 2019, it is still set in 2005. So there were no cell phones, but there was a payphone, and the costumes were kind of vintage, and the music was great. And I honestly have not read a single bad review about this show so far, and I think that says a lot. Some new pranks were added in the show, and I think just the sequence of scenes in which the story was delivered was what made the show better. In the book, the colonel tells Miles not to be a rat as if it's the worst thing ever, but in the show, that is actually given a reason. He says that this school means a lot to people and their future depends on it, and if you tell on them and get them expelled, then you are ruining their future, and that is too big a punishment for anything. And even his nickname, the colonel, came from the logic that he did military level planning of whatever prank he was planning to pull, and I really like these tiny details. All the characters in the show were more rounded, and there wasn't a single flat character. Everyone had a backstory and they had a reason for the way they behaved. So, Dr. Hyde had a backstory, and the Colonel's mother had an important role. And everyone else, Sarah, Lara, that rhymes, but anyway, Sarah, Lara, the eagle, they were all given more depth, and even Miles was more likable in the show. In the book, since the narration was from Miles's perspective, we saw every character in a biased manner. We saw them the way Miles saw them, and we saw only what Miles saw. But in the show, we could see the scenes that Miles wasn't privy to. Because even if shows and movies focus on one particular character, they are still in third person perspective. And these scenes let us into the minds of characters and provided a wider spectrum of understanding. Now I want to talk about some of the differences between the book and the show. So Alaska wasn't impulsive. That was mellowed down slightly. And her being the rat was a big thing in the show. There was a major fight after that, and it led her to feel shitty about herself. And she did not really feel worthy of Jake anymore, and she broke up with him. Also, Alaska was quite attracted to Miles, and it almost felt as if there was a subtle feud between Lara and Alaska, and they were kind of competing for Miles's attention. So when Alaska finally made out with Miles, it wasn't technically cheating. And when she told him to be continued, that phrase had a different implication. So Alaska was quite different. She was almost sensible. And what I really liked was that in the show, Takumi did not know all along that she was driving to her mother's grave. He was actually a part of the investigation. Everything is so much better, and honestly, I can't say this enough. If you like the book, you will love the show. And hopefully you like this video too. If you want more, you can check out other book talk episodes, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.